Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of Scale Up Radio, the podcast inspired by the entrepreneurial scale up system and designed to make navigating our scale up journeys that little bit easier by learning from each other's experiences. I'm Granger Forson, and on this episode of the show, I'm joined by Nigel Whitehouse, the CEO and owner of TruffleHunter UK. Nigel's journey from a hobbyist in Italy to leading the only UK company manufacturing a range of truffle projects is really inspiring. He shares his strategies for managing growth, navigating the challenges of pandemic, and then having to deal with the perfect storm that then hit his business afterwards, and how he's restructured the business for its next phase of growth with the exciting prospects of expanding into the US market. To ensure you don't miss any inspirational future episodes, do subscribe to Scale Up Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Also, you can nominate a guest for Scale Up Radio if you know someone with an intriguing scale-up journey. You can find out how in the show notes. So let's now dive into the inspiring journey of niching truffle products, global expansion, and the resilience of growth with Nigel Whitehouse. So, hello, Nigel Whitehouse. Welcome to Scale Up Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, sure. It's very nice to meet you, Granger. My name is Nigel Whitehouse, and I'm the CEO of a business called TruffleHunter, based in Gloucestershire in the UK.
Brilliant. All right, I've been looking forward to this podcast, so and I'll explain that a bit later on, no doubt. But right, Truffle Hunters, yeah, that's a nice name. So, what is it you do? How long have you been going? Who are your customers?
Yes, certainly. So we are, as the name suggests, we're a truffle business. We're actually the only business, remarkably, the only business in the UK actually manufacturing a range of truffle products. We started the business, originally I started it as a hobby probably about 17 years ago. Did it for a couple of years as a hobby when I was living in Italy. Saw what I thought was a market opportunity, came back to the UK, and started doing the business as a proper business, let me say, from October 2010. So I think we're in our 14th year now.
Wow.
We, as the name suggests, we buy and sell fresh truffles. That was the original concept of the business. And then the truffles that we don't sell, we turn into products. And over the last 14 years, we've basically just added and developed and improved a range of products to now we have quite a wide portfolio of them.
Yeah, well, we love your truffle oil and your truffle butter in our household. That's what I've been looking forward to speaking to you. My partner's very excited around that. It's one of her favourite things that she likes. So awesome. So 17 years ago, you started doing it. 14 years ago in Gloucestershire. Were you always based here?
Yeah, we hired a little unit down the road from where we are now. In fact, it wasn't even a full unit; it was half a unit. So we hired the downstairs, very quickly took up the upstairs, and then the building next door, and then the one next door to that. And then in April 2015, we moved to a much larger site, still in the same area. And we've been adding units ever since. We have about 10 units now on site here that we use for offices, manufacturing, and obviously warehousing as well.
So how big are you? How many staff do you currently have?
Well, one of the things that I will elaborate on is we've just been through a rather severe restructuring exercise, and we've downsized considerably. So, we do use a lot of agency temporary staff, but putting those aside, we at one point had more than 50 permanent staff. We're now down to less than 40.
Yeah, that's quite a dramatic change. So definitely we'll come to that and have a discussion on that. I think that's really important. So just tell us about your customers. Who are your customers? Where are they, and how do they find you?
Well, I think one thing about our business, which is very different, is we are such a niche product. So there's a couple of things when I started the business. Number one, because it's a niche product and because the market size is kind of limited, then I realized two things. One, that I would need to sell the product all over the world to make a decent amount of revenue. And two, I would need to be in a number of sales channels. So what I like to say is, rather than being, if you take a business, a lot of businesses, you'll have a very narrow sales channel, right? Because it's a much higher volume product. Whereas because we're a niche business and because we are specialists and what we do is almost unique, we have a very narrow product range, but we have the ability to operate in every single sales channel.
Yeah.
So, you say most businesses, most typical food businesses, they would either be in retail or they would be in food service or they would be in manufacturing or, they'd be selling to certain niche geographical location or whatever. We have the ability to do everything. So we have almost every food sales channel you can imagine, really. So, we sell online, direct to the consumer. We sell direct to restaurants. We sell via food service distributors into restaurants. On retail, we'll sell direct to the retailers, but we also sell into retailers via distributors. We also sell a significant piece of our businesses to other food manufacturers that use truffle products, notably cheese manufacturers. We've got some of the biggest cheese manufacturers in the UK that use our products. Other food manufacturers, non-cheese, and obviously, as I said, the export markets as well. So we have a really, really wide range of channels, and that's one of the advantages, I would say, of our business. The downside to that is it gives you a complexity, and particularly on the export side, it gives you a complexity from a legal entity point of view because, you end up with quite a complex legal structure where we have legal entities, all over. I think we've got something like 6 companies, and all of those require, accounting, administration, legal, tax, etc. So yeah, it swings and roundabouts. It's a consequence of being in that niche product, I think.
And did you have that realization when you first sort of started out in the first few years, or is it something that you've realized as you've gone along?
No, I mean, that's from the word go, really. From the word go, I realized that we would need to be an international business and that we would need to develop overseas markets, possibly even more so because at the time, there was really very little interest in truffle in the UK. So probably there's a lot more interest in truffle in the UK than there was when I started the business. That's a good thing. But yeah, I definitely realised that we would need the international side of the business. Probably what I underestimated was the legal complexities that can come from that and the costs associated with that. And the other thing that I probably underestimated as well, or didn't realise, was the significant size of the potential business into other food manufacturers. That was not a sales channel that was envisaged when we started the business. When we started the business, the original sales channels that we targeted were online. So I actually built it myself. It was very crude, but we had the world's first online shop selling fresh truffles.
Okay.
The idea was I was based in Italy and I was buying truffles off the local hunters and shipping them back by DHL to, supposedly affluent customers in the UK who wanted to use them for dinner parties, right? So that was the first channel. Commercially, it was a disaster, but it was it was something different. And then also trying to sell those fresh truffles into restaurants and chefs in the UK as well. So those are the first channels that we started with. We very quickly evolved from there.
So you have such a wide range of clients. How do you sort of delight them? Is each one different in their requirements, or do you have a real sort of way of knowing how to delight them?
Well, I think it's obviously very different for a B2C customer to a B2B customer. So, direct to consumer is, you're really in touch with the consumer. You can really, hopefully, talk to them, keep them happy, keep them interested in your product, really try and engage with them on a one-to-one basis. Whereas obviously when you're selling through large distributors, the focus is much more on working with the distributor and trying to partner with them, get into their customers. So, yeah, I guess that's probably the key difference.
Okay. So you started the business, in Italy. You came up with the idea, and then you moved back to the UK to do that. How do you get your product? If many truffle hunters are there in the UK, or is it all in Europe?
We do have some truffle hunters in the UK, but we use a very small quantity of UK truffles.
Yeah.
So our truffles come from all over Europe. I mean, when we started the business, obviously we were 100% Italian truffles. But again, we learned quite quickly that actually it's not really feasible nor optimal, not for us or the consumer, to buy truffles only from Italy. We know, because we now have some expertise, we now know that what time of the year actually it's better to source the truffles from Spain or from France or from, Italy or from elsewhere. Eastern Europe, some of our truffles come from Istria. And we know that when is the right time to buy, when the truffles are at their best and at the right price. And the other thing that you also learn is Italian truffles, as per, French truffles, actually, remarkably small percentage actually come from Italy.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a bit of inside information. So you have to be, the fresh truffle business can be a bit of a shady business, let me say that. And you have to be very careful with the characters that you deal with.
Wow. Oh, fascinating. And I mean, what are the sort of things then, you have to be mindful of or careful of without giving away any trade secrets? That's really interesting statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so for example, right, there is there's a thing called a Chinese truffle that looks very much like the Black Winter melanosporum truffle, which is one of the premium truffles. It looks very similar, but it doesn't have anywhere near the same kind of flavor or aroma or quality, and it sells, for $30 a kilo or something rather than, hundreds. And it's actually technically illegal to import that truffle into Italy. So which country is the biggest importer of Chinese truffles?
Yes, we don't need to say the name out loud, right? Interesting.
So, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff goes on.
So what you started it off yourself as a hobby. What made that transition? Why did you actually say, right, there's a real business here and we can really make something of it?
Well, it was partly foresight and partly luck, I would say.
Okay.
Being perfectly honest. So a major reason was we had a little baby daughter, and we were living in the middle of nowhere in Italy, right? I mean, really miles from anywhere, right in the mountains, fantastic location, but not the kind of place that I wanted to bring up my daughter.
Yeah.
So, part of it was that discussion. It was like, well, what are we going to do? We can't bring our daughter up here. It's the middle of nowhere. I know. Why don't we go back to England? We've got these ideas. Let's go back and we'll start a proper truffle business in the UK. So it was kind of, yeah, a combination of those two things, really. We're very much responsible for the decision to actually take it forward. Obviously, we thought there was an opportunity. The competition at the time wasn't particularly impressive. It's more impressive now. But at the time, the competition was pretty weak, really. There was nobody selling an English language labelled or presented truffle products anywhere in the world. So we were the first to do that, and that was obviously a key driver. We came up with a great name. I think it is a great name. I still think it's a great name with the branding. And everything just seemed to fall into place. It just seemed to make sense. We picked up a major customer who's become a good friend of mine, a major customer in the UK when we were first in Italy, and who really helped us develop the business as well. And he said to us at the time, he was buying a lot of truffle products from Italy, wasn't happy with the service that he was getting. And he said at the time, why don't you make these products? If you make these products, I'll buy them from you. So that was another driver.
Excellent.
So sometimes all the things just drop into place at the right time, I guess, when you're lucky, right?
Yes, definitely. So I mean, it's very niche, as you've talked about. It's a niche product, and then you turn it into the niche products that you also sell as well. What's the marketplace like? Is there much competition now? I mean, I presume when you started, there was just yourselves, very small. What's marketplace like?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. We're still there's been a lot of startups, a lot of truffle startups. In the UK, we're still very much the dominant player, no question about that. It's our home turf. We should be. There were, don't get me wrong, when I started the business at the time, there were dozens of companies in Italy doing something similar, making truffle products and selling truffle products. It's just that we were doing something very different because, one, we were trying to make something that was really geared and presentable towards an English language market, branding-wise, very different. The name TruffleHunter, their concept, they're all family businesses. They're all named after the family forefathers. They're all Italian branded and expensive products. So we differentiated ourselves from the word go there. Those companies are still around. They still exist. And they're still pretty small. There's one or two very large Italian brands that have always been there, particularly strong in the US, who we compete against. And again, they've been around for donkey's years. And then in addition to that, there's quite a few new English language businesses that have started up. A couple in the UK, but they're still very small. But again, predominantly in the US, because the US is, the number one, obviously, truffle market, number one market for pretty well any consumer goods, obviously, right? And a couple of those businesses have grown very quickly and have been very successful. They're all doing something still slightly different to what we do. So as long as we stay different, then I think, we've still got a good future ahead.
So you've grown over the last 14 years. I presume it's not been a steady growth. It's been up and down. So take us through the journey of growth so far. Some things have gone right, some things have gone wrong, and then maybe we'll have a final conversation around the resizing you've just been doing. So
Yeah, sure. I mean, you say it's not being, well, not consistent, but actually, we started the business. In year one, we lost £20,000. Yeah. And for the next 10 years, we grew the revenue and the profit. We made profit, obviously, in year two. We grew the revenue and grew the profit every year for 10 years, very consistently, actually, very strongly and very consistently. Um, and then we had this horrible thing called COVID. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, to try and summarize a little bit what has happened, we grew sales, we grew profits right up until COVID. COVID hit. Our online sales boomed even more, although we lost all of our wholesale business. We still had revenue growth. We still had profit growth in the first 12 months of COVID. And then since then, you have a very unforeseen, unique situation where we have COVID fallout. So obviously, e-commerce, winter, post-COVID, sales collapse, the war in Ukraine, Brexit, inflation as a result of that, economic slowdown as a result of that. And it's been a perfect storm. Raging inflation, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but particularly on raw materials. And I think that a lot of food businesses have suffered. Changing something else, which is definitely a contentious issue, the changing working environment as well. People's work habits have changed significantly as a result of COVID. So we find ourselves in a position when COVID hit, where our sales were still accelerating rapidly. We, with hindsight, again, would have done something different, but we overinvested. We took on additional staff, we took on additional premises, built a lot of stock. And then, as I said, we had this perfect storm, which all, if you think of all those events that happened within a very short space of time, it really knocked our business for six. And it's taken us, I would say, 18 months to restructure the business and get it back to where we are now, which is back on track. At one point, it looked like we really were in a serious situation.
Yeah. So what are the type of things you've had to do during this restructuring then? Because you expanded during COVID because of the online sales. Has that disappeared as well then, or?
Well, the online sales dropped back massively. Obviously, they boomed in COVID.
Yeah.
And then they spent, I think it was probably about just over 12 months, somewhere between 12 and 18 months, that dropped year on year.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the last 9 months, they've been growing again. So we are back to above pre-COVID levels for online sales.
Okay.
So that's the good news. But our wholesale sales have struggled to some extent. And I do think that's primarily due to consumer spending being hammered. Obviously we're a discretionary product. We are not a low-cost product. We're affordable, hopefully, but we're not a low-cost product. And this Christmas that has just gone, the high-end retail trading environment was very difficult. A big portion of our revenue comes from retailers, high-end retailers, and distributors selling into those retailers, and those distributors had a hard time.
Yeah.
Really hard time. I don't think you'd be surprised by me saying that.
Yeah.
So, where we are now is, as I say, we've had to. And the other thing is because our wholesale business has dropped back. I think what has happened with a high end product is that people are spending less money in restaurants, but they're probably happy to shell out a little bit more to have something a bit more special at home, which
Right.
is why our online sales, I think, have held up well and are growing again, whereas our restaurant and higher end retail sales have struggled a little bit. Food service particularly is struggling. The restaurant business in this country is struggling. But as an overview, where we are now is our online sales are growing quite strongly. Our UK wholesale sales, food service and food service and retail are holding up. You know, they're down a little bit, but they're holding up. We've lost a huge amount of business from Europe as a result of Brexit as well, which hasn't helped us and has also pushed our costs up.
So it's been a big storm. So, you know, how have you gone about, you know, with your leadership team? How have you gone about thinking about the restructuring that's taken place? You know, what's been your sort of thinking process?
Well, it's really just been about focusing on the cost base really and eliminating, improving systems, improving processes, simplifying our business as much as possible, taking out some of the complexity in terms of some of the products that we were making that we decided to cut. Some of the legal entity structures, we've rationalised some of that. Volumes are not down, but they've not been growing, and you know, production has been very the efficiency in our production unit has been ongoing ever since we started, and that has continued. So the business doesn't feel as busy. We don't need as many people. We've had to let a lot of people go, which has been very painful.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, you know, in the 11 years prior to that, you know, we were a fast growing business that we were hiring a lot of people, and it was, you know, felt like a real high energy place. When you start making people redundant, that obviously puts a different perspective on it. And to be blunt, when you say, what have we done with the leadership team? Well, the leadership team has largely been changed.
Right.
Yeah, because not everyone was able to understand the reasons for change, the need for change. Yeah, some people, for some reason, just didn't understand the necessity for some quite dramatic changes.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have got a great business. We've made a lot of money over the years, but if we hadn't have made the changes that we've made, there's no doubt the business would have been very close to going bankrupt.
Well, there's some big changes you've done, you know, and I've been through redundancy rounds in businesses I've worked in the past, so I can understand that. How have you tried to maintain the culture in the business, and then, you know, the people that have remained in the business? You know, what have you done to sort of keep that going?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I've got a small number of absolutely phenomenal key employees that have been with us for a long time. And I think they know me, and I think I know them pretty well, and I think we work well together, and I think they trust me. And I think, you know, they believe me when I tell them that this is what we need to do, and they have supported me really well. So, you know, we've got across the organisation, we've got these pillars of really amazing individuals, many of which started with us in very junior roles and have grown with the business. So I hope there's certainly a massive amount of loyalty from me towards them. And I think there's probably a significant amount of loyalty from them towards me as well. And I think, you really need those are the kind of people that can really turn a business round and make all the difference.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The key individuals.
That's not to say, I must, be clear, that's not to say that we haven't hired new people that are also done fantastic work for us. But again, we've hired some great new people that have really gone the extra mile through this restructuring process. But there's other newer hires that just did not want to deal with it, and they've dropped out as well. So it is a mixed bag. We've been very lucky because basically we've managed to keep everyone that we wanted to.
Excellent. So, that's the difficult point at this moment in time. The challenges you've come over during the growth phase when you were growing. What sort of key challenges did you overcome during those last 10 years? Do you think that have really sort of challenged where you thought you were going and where you ended up?
Honestly, I think it's just been success after success, really.
Brilliant.
I know that the challenges have all been day-to-day issues and problems, and some of which are small and some of which are massive. But they're just incidents that you deal with. In terms of, the overall structure and momentum of the business, as I say, we've had great people. They've all been pulling in the right direction. And that is really the only challenge, is making sure you've got the right people and that you're keeping them happy and keeping them motivated.
I mean, business is so much around people, yes, there's processes, yes, there's the product, yeah, but actually, you need the right people, motivated and the right people on the right path and the commitment and the track that you're going on, and that is a massive part of business and business life. As you'd say, there's always problems every day, and if you've got the right people there, you don't have to be personally involved in every problem. People will get them fixed and make it happen, and that's the power of having the right people around you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, generally, in the business, if I was to give you a magic wand, what would you wave it over to change? What drives you crazy in this industry?
Well, I'm not very keen on Brexit, to say the least.
Yeah.
For a small business like ours, trying to sell a food product into Europe, it's a nightmare, and it's still a nightmare. So yeah, I'd want to wave my magic wand and make that go away. I'm potentially concerned about what's going on in the US, obviously, because there's a big unknown there in terms of potential impact on economy and trade, right, with the election coming up.
Yeah.
That's a concern. Yeah, in terms of what else I would change if I had a magic wand, I think those are the two key things, really.
Brilliant. Well, you've done the restructure. You've come through the hard time. The business is now, you said, is in a very stable position, and is ready for the future. So let's talk about the future. Let's meet again in 5 years' time and have a look back, have a coffee, and sit back and look back at the last 5 years. What's happened within the business, both for you personally and professionally, to have a successful 5 years?
In the future?
Yes.
Looking forward? Yeah. Looking forward, well, I'm going to repeat what I've just said, which is what happens in the US is going to be critical, because that is a major market for us, and it's a market where we expect to see most of our growth going forward. And we've just done a deal actually with a major distributor in the US, which is going to give us a huge revenue going forward if things remain as we hope they are. So that's a major market for us, a major investment, and we're looking to grow that business significantly. And in 5 years' time, with a fair wind, that the revenue we get from the US will be greater than our total revenue now. So that's certainly the future. I would have liked to say that we're going to make great progress in China, but I feel that at one point we were investing in China and it was looking like it was going to be a good market for us. We've actually pulled our investments there now because I think that it's a very challenging economy at the moment. It's a very challenging landscape to be trading in. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to make great progress in China over the next 5 years. I hope that situation changes and that we can get back to investing there. So we shall have to see if that becomes an opportunity again or not. Our online sales are growing very nicely, and I see us, investing in that more so in the future. It's obviously good margin business, and I expect to see our online channels really start to build momentum again going forward. Now we're kind of back to where we were just pre-COVID and starting to see some really good growth. I think our production facility is working really well, and now we start putting through some decent volume again. We should hopefully get our production efficiencies back towards increasing efficiency again. And as a result of that, I really think we can start to grow our margins. And probably the last piece is certainly raw materials. So, a combination of this stupid war in Ukraine, inflation, we've had massive increases in raw, and also I have to say global warming as well. We've had massive increases in raw material prices recently, phenomenal increases. We're paying 3 times now for olive oil than what we were paying before COVID. 3 times.
Yeah.
So, I think hopefully things there will calm down a bit, and some of the raw material prices will drop again, which would really help us with our margins significantly. So now I'm excited about it. I think we've got a really good team. I think one thing that's worth talking about actually is, our organisation, when we had the COVID boom, and we hired a lot of people, and we ended up with quite a few layers of management. And as part of the restructuring process, we streamlined that. And that's been a really fascinating exercise in a number of ways, because not only have we reduced the number of people and the cost, but really noticeably, we've increased the pace of the business. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were, what advantages has a small business got over, a multinational massive business? The main advantage is speed to market and response time, right?
Yeah.
And whilst we had all these additional layers of management, it was just slowing everything down. So, not only have we had the benefit of the cost savings from that restructuring, but equally importantly, we've given ourselves a massive injection of adrenaline. And I think that's quite an interesting observation.
And during your growth, during COVID, you put that structure in place. You must have had an idea of why you needed it, but now you're discovering that you don't need it, and it actually gets in the way of speed. I mean, what's the change that's taken place then?
I think the change that that's a really good question. I think there's a number of things. I think probably the key change that took place was I felt like I should step away from the business and do something different. And in order to do that, I felt that I needed extra senior management to facilitate that transition. And as a consequence of the trading environment, we've basically reversed that decision.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's just what it is.
So you've stepped back as the founder into running the business, and actually decisions can happen faster because it's not a committee, it's an individual making decisions. Yeah.
It's really true. Really true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can feel the energy, you can feel the adrenaline, you can feel the momentum building again, and it's really noticeable.
Well, Nigel, thank you very much. It was a great conversation. I'm sure we could actually go on for a good hour on this, plus the restructure and what you've learned from it.
Now, can I just make one more comment?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I mean, it has been a fascinating exercise, the restructuring, right? So something else that, I've noticed, we had to cut our costs. Our costs were too high. We had to cut them. So we made some people redundant. We did some streamlining. We cut processes. We did this. We did that. The other thing that I did was, as a short-term panic, in a way, crisis situation, I said, right, I want to authorize personally every single thing that we buy, right? Every single thing that we buy, I want to authorize it myself, which caused, you can imagine, a massive amount of contention. And then what we find is when we look at the cost base, we can see that we've saved a huge amount of money year on year, right? And we can actually say, right, of the amount of money that we've saved, we can actually identify about 50% of it in terms of, headcounts, contracts that we didn't need, things that we were buying that we didn't need to buy. I would say concrete things that I identified that we could cut accounts for about 50% of the cost savings. The other 50% just disappears, right? And it's quite simply that we were buying things that we didn't need, and now I have to authorize them all. People are not requesting them. So we saved all this money, and I've no idea what we were spending it on in the first place.
Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And, substitutions, where do you think some of that has disappeared from then? Why have people stopped buying them?
I just think it was stuff that we didn't need. People were spending stuff that we didn't need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We built up that fat and that way of working over time without actually challenging ourselves on a regular basis. Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand as well, we came from a background where, we grew the business for 10, 12 years, whatever it was, and we never had any focus on costs. We were making a lot of money. We were very profitable. People were getting big bonuses. We were spending money left, right, and centre. And we just didn't pay any attention to the cost. So it was a very radical change to have to suddenly, start to justify everything that we were spending money on.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I mean, the honesty you've taken us through the restructuring, but, that realization of as you're growing and you're really successful, you're spending money, you're employing people, you're changing, you're onboarding more processes, you're onboarding more clients, you're onboarding more ways of doing things. But actually, without that real focus on detail of everything that's happened, which is great, because that's what you're doing when you're growing at scale. It's you called it an adrenaline drive, isn't it? I mean, no, that's fantastic. And then along came the perfect storm, as you called it. All those changes happening at once, changing so much happened, and you had to take that pause, that refresh of the business. You've done that restructuring, you've got back involved in the business and reorganize what needs to be done, and now you've got that structure ready to go forward. And that's absolutely brilliant. And you can't read these things, you can't see these things, you learn these things, and that's what you've done as the entrepreneur, as the business owner. You've gone through that journey, and you're coming out that other end, and you're now going to find the next 5-10 years growth of how you'll do that, but with the experience that you now have and that knowledge, and that's invaluable, that you never can get directly from people. People can tell you it, but until you experience it, you don't understand it. So Nigel, thank you so much. Fantastic conversation. We always finish off with a very quick fire round, if I may. Just a few questions to close us off. So if you went back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would have started the business at a younger age. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sold it probably 10 years ago.
Brilliant. Yes. Any books you recommend?
I'm not a reader. I'm not a big reader. No.
Any podcasts you listen to?
Just boring podcasts like Newscast or Americast or Football Daily or
Any apps on your mobile phone that you use very regularly and make a difference for you?
All the banking apps.
And who's had the most influence on you as a business owner?
My wife, definitely.
And finally, Nigel, how can people get hold of you?
Send me an email. Don't bother trying to phone me, because I never answer my phone and I never listen to voicemails either. So, but you can send me an email at nigel@trufflehunter.co.uk. I love email, and that's the quickest way of getting hold of me. And you'll always get a response.
Brilliant. Well, Nigel, thank you so much for your open and honest conversation today. There's been some fantastic takeaways in here for growth and then what comes next. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's very enjoyable experience, and it's very nice to meet you. Thank you for your offer to do this.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way, and you can order a copy at all your favourite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources at our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is spelt ESUSGROUP.co.uk. Thank you.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.